Chapter 9 Mortaeus. It was Gwen. For a moment, Elune thought the woman was about to strike her and she swung her arm back to counteract the blow. Then she saw it was the maid who had brought Bayard the food the night before. Stop, Elune told her. For her diminutive frame, Gwen was very strong, but she managed to wrest free easily and bested the situation by holding on to both of Gwen's arms. I'm supposed to be in the dungeons and... Elune broke off when she saw Gwen's face and backed away. Really? Gwen asked in disbelief, hissing her words in hushed tones. You aren't a Camelot guard, you're a broken bar Saxon servant, or kitchen hand, or whatever. Look, she added, changing the subject. I heard what you said to the Saxon lady's maid. And? The woman who spoke to your friend, Merlin, Gwen guided. Merlin, Elune repeated. She's no Saxon. Whatever she told Merlin about Bayard's drinking cups was false, and, yes, Gwen interjected, with frustration. We think that too. And, we? Elune asked. Gaius and I. And? Gaius a broken bar? Look, Gwen told Elune, irritated. Gaius is Merlin's guardian. He thinks magic was involved, and that Bayard is innocent. But he has no evidence. Will you come with me? Tell him, please. Broken bar. It was true Elune wasn't needed on guard duty. It might help to clear Bayard. Then she could stay on in Mercia, see what she could discover about Lancelot. You could do it here, a little voice in Elune's head told her. But she shook it away. Uther's policy of zero tolerance on magic had killed what family she'd once had. And what was it? Exactly that I said? Elune asked. Gwen stared at her for a moment. Apart from being Saiyans disguised as a Camelot guard, Gwen replied angrily. You need to come with me. Gwen made to pull her arm. Elune shook it away, angrily. I don't have to do anything. Number. You don't. But you put your life on the line for your king, so don't you wish to? But her words were drowned out by Elune's own. I'll come. But not for Camelot. For that young man who risked his life for his master. Merlin. Elune nodded. For Merlin. 88,888,888. And so for Merlin, a Camelot guard crossed the courtyard and followed a maid, ascended a set of steps and entered the rooms belonging to Gaius, the court physician. The man was old. Very old. But age mattered not when treating the sick. In Elune's experience, when she was not away with Matthew in the woods, she would sit near Coedenice's home and listen as he treated people, listen as he listened to them, their ailments, their troubles. As long as a physician was good, a person in need did not care the age, nor any other credential of that person. But, of course, the price of being good was to remain good. Coedenice could never hope to be the best in exile, as Uther had made him. The village lost the day he was made to leave, and Bishop's coming did not make up for the loss. Gaius, Gwen murmured, her eyes never straying from the very ill young man whom Gaius was treating. This guard has something he needs to tell you. Arthur a broken bar. The murmur came from Merlin before Gaius had a chance to even look at Elune. Handing a cloth to Gwen, he intimated she should mop his brow. It will bring down his fever and give his body a chance. Arthur will come back a broken bar. Arthur a broken bar. The Bridgie a broken bar. The flower a broken bar. In just a few hours, Elune's hunch would be confirmed and she would know. Truly know. But then, she could only guess. She had seen this before. Matthew, dozing beside her on a summer's day, meadow-bluthine flowers, their yellow buds surrounding him like the haze the sun sometimes wore in the very height of the season. Her friend had suddenly reached for hand as she sat there, his words surprising her in their suddenness. He had spoken in broken phrases, just as Merlin was doing. The thing was, though, that those phrases were words that linked to a terrible storm that would come a week later, drowning livestock in the quantity of rain that fell, destroying crops that had been planted. It was only a few hours later that Merlin's words told her exactly what he was. Who are you? Gaius asked, with a sharpness that belied a man of his years. Elune pulled out of her thoughts and fixed her eyes on Gaius. I came because Gwen eavesdropped a conversation I was having, Elune told Gaius. She believes something I said has relevance. Oh? And what is that? His voice continued with its sharpness, His eyes continued their fix on Elund. That the woman to whom Merlin was speaking was not Saxon. She glanced at Gwen, who did not move. "Oh," Gaius replied, looking at Elund with contempt, "you speak say I do not. Would you kindly say that again in Cymraeg?" Elund paused. It had got Gaius's attention, at any rate, and she repeated it in the Briton tongue. "And you know this because he broken bar?" But Elund had already turned on her heel and was striding to the door. Before she had opened the bottom one to the courtyard, Gwen had caught up with her. "Thank you," she told Elund. "You are kind and brave to do this. For the good it will do," Elund told her. "My words will not aid his recovery. Only the flower sought by Prince Arthur can do that. But it helped us in Camelot, and it will probably help your king Bayard," which was all that could be done. Elund nodded to Gwen and then hurried across the courtyard, ready to be blasted by the guard captain for her absence. 88,888,888. But whether Elund was missed on a guard duty that wasn't even her own was irrelevant. She stopped in her haste to the dungeons and saw, by the setting sun, Arthur Pendragon returned, exhaustion searing his features, war decorating his mail suit and armor. There was blood, but there was also something in his hand. "I was called to aid Prince Arthur, for he has returned," Elund had decided was her excuse. But all excuses were irrelevant, for, even in the short time that it took to cross from the courtyard to the dungeon passageway, the guard captain had detained the prince and was leading him to imprisonment. 88,888,888. The captain released Bayard just as Elund had got down the steps. One or two of the guards frowned in her direction, Elphice included, but she nodded towards Arthur as if to suggest that she had been called to be involved in the arrest of the prince. Then suddenly, they all looked up the steps, startled, before straightening up and adjusting loose uniform. Elund looked back, then backed against the wall. King Arthur was striding down the steps. He entered the small guard area and nodded to the captain and then to Bayard. It was only then that the King of Mercia moved past the King of Camelot and nodded. Arthur nodded too, and then, when Bayard had gone through the gate at the top of the stairs, did he approach his son, guiding him to the alcove where Elund and Elphice had stood, or in Elphice's case slouched, as they had guarded Bayard. "He's in trouble now," Elphice told Elund, as sharp shouts, and equally sharp retorts diffused out to them. "Sh!" hissed one of the other guards, as he leaned towards the argument. At this, the captain stepped in front of him, frowning. Then, he looked between Elund and Elphice. "You two, with me." Elund stepped beside Elphice and followed the captain, just as King Arthur threw an object onto the floor. "No!" Arthur screamed. But Arthur turned to his son who, Elund noticed, was now in the cell Bayard had occupied. "You have to learn there's a right and a wrong way of doing things," Arthur told the prince. "I'll see you're let out in a week. Then you can find yourself another servant. One of these guards will do." Arthur thrust a finger towards Elund and glowered, before stalking away. Elund gasped at the harshness that the King of Camelot had displayed to his son. To witness it second-hand was one thing, tough laws that drove healers and seers away was one thing. But to condemn a servant, Merlin, who had done nothing more than she had done in defense of King Bayard, it was much more than harsh. It was unfeeling cruelty. "You heard the king, boys," the captain told Elund and Elphice. "Guard the prince tonight. And you," he pointed a finger at Elund, "are to be the prince's servant. Heaven knows why you," he added, leaving and shaking his head. 88,888,888. "I don't think you can reach it, sire," Elphice told Arthur as he tried again to get a hand close enough to the Mortaeus flower to enclose it in his hand. "Well, why don't you?" Arthur changed positions, though it made little difference. "Help me." He reached out, straining in the effort. Then, Elphice looked across to Elund, who looked down at the flower. If no solution presented itself in the next 5 minutes, she herself would scoop the flower up and take it to the surly physician Gaius. "You then," Arthur looked to Elund. "Move it with your foot, we can say the wind caught it." His voice changed, becoming what she remembered best of Arthur Pendragon, low and warm. like honey made by drowsy bees on a hot summer's day. Elune looked at Arthur, then back to the flower, and made to pick it up, but then stopped, as Gwen appeared at the alcove. "It's all right, Aled. No need to bow to me." As sharp as she was pleasant, Gwen hid the flower on the tray on which a broth stood. Arthur, who had not seen the exchange, stood close to the locked door. "Open it, Elphys," Elune encouraged, nodding to the supper. Fumbling in his pocket for the key on the chain, the young guard opened the lock, standing back to let Gwen pass. "Should you have done that?" Elphys asked Elune, a worried expression creasing over his face. "Done what?" Elune rebuffed, glancing at Gwen and Arthur, who were engaged in a conversation all of their own. "Oh, if you mean the mess left on the floor, well, the maid I am sure would be happy to take it away." Then she leaned closer to her comrade and brought her volume down to a whisper. "It is the difference between a person living and them dying, Elphys." The look of concern remained a little longer on the boy's face, and then a smile appeared, like the dawning of a new day. Oh, I see." He leaned close to Elune. "The person you went to see a broken bar. She is dying a broken bar?" Elune briefly thought of Seren. "No, not her. But someone." "Don't you think he will make a good king, caring about the people of Camelot as he does?" Yes, nodded Elphys. And, with a presence of mind that belied even Elune's expectations, he closed and locked the cell door behind Gwen, following her up the stairs and out of the gate at the top. Elune had watched Gwen's figure get smaller and smaller as she ascended, little knowing that one day she would be ashamed of the thoughts she would have of the woman. There would be a time Elune and Gwen would get on well, and that time was also to come, but would be all too fleeting. Food for the prisoner. Came a call from above not 5 minutes later. Kay was beside Elune in a heartbeat. "Hasn't the prisoner already eaten?" "I can see a bowl in his cell." Kay stared into the cell, making eye contact with Arthur, and then turning back to Elune. "Where's Elphys?" "Chasing after the false servant," Elune declared loudly, pointing in the direction of the stairs. 88,888,888. The moon's light bathed the dungeon in its weak silveriness again, and Elune thought how different this night was to the last. Bayard was there, asking her questions, as Elphys dozed on the job. That night, Prince Arthur was silent, pacing the cell's floor and glancing out towards them. She had a new colleague since Elphys had not returned, called Hector, who was as silent as the prince. "I'm going to rest," Hector told her, as the moon rose higher and yet more light shone around them. "Wake me up when the moon's gone down, then you can sleep." Hector paused, and then added, "What?" when Elune stared at him. But she had halted in her thoughts not from the instruction but from the situation. The situation that she was a guard ought to be strange to a low status, Britain-born girl. But it wasn't. It felt right to be a guard, and a guard of Camelot, at that. "Yes," Elune nodded, quite vigorously, as if to shake the horrifying thought from her mind. "You sleep, I'll guard." And, guard she did, pacing steadily before Arthur's cell as the occupant paced within. The cast moon's light slowly faded as time passed, and Elune looked out of the alcove towards Hector, who was snoring, quite out of it, over the table. "Leave him," her mind told her. "You will be gone tomorrow, back to Amwythig, and then east, beyond the Hayfren. Allow yourself to do something you enjoy." "You should wake him," Arthur advised, as Elune began to pace again. "It's his turn to guard, yours to sleep." "No," Elune told Arthur. "I am beyond sleep. Trying will be worse." "How about yourself, sire? Shouldn't you be resting?" "The flower has been taken by Gwen. Your servant will live." Arthur strode to the iron bars. Close to, Elune could see his face, firm with graveness, mouth grim. "Thanks to you." Elune stopped too, and looked at Arthur. Even in this dim light, his eyes sparkled with truth. "No, not me." She was coming anyway. Elune made to walk past the gate, but Arthur made a grab for her arm. Elune wrestled free, gripping the spear she was carrying, holding it towards him. Arthur let go, but stood, unmoving, by the cell's doors. "I only wish that you would stop walking up and down," Arthur told her. "Sit." "Tell me your name." Elune lowered the spear, but did not sit. "Aled." She told him, "You are a dedicated guard, Aeled. Whence come you?" "A village, whose laws are Camelot's laws," Elune told him. "And where is this village?" "It was by the Haefron," Elune told him. "But I am lately informed that it was destroyed." She stood silently, gazing off into the far darkness. Half was in her mind, as good a mother as one could ask for, and Owen, who permitted her to spend time with Matthew. "Did you ever have a man come to be a knight of Camelot from my village?" she asked, suddenly. Arthur moved his head, and smiled in the darkness. "It is possible one came," Arthur told her. "But, if he was not of a noble family, then he could never be a knight of Camelot." Elune fell to silence again, a spark of hope in her stomach. Maybe Lancelot had come, only to be turned away, then returned to the village only to find it destroy a broken bar. A broken bar. If she were Lancelot, where would she go? If she had been turned away from Camelot, back to the village. But then he would have found the village destroyed and everyone dead. A broken bar. A broken bar. So what? The broken bar, Elune thought. And then the idea came to her, and it was obvious. He would go north, to Urien's kingdom, or south, to Mark's. He would find a company of knights who would accept a refugee villager. News of Lancelot may be all over the country. Mercia was a node, a meeting point. Information could not go between south and north of the Wellies without a good deal passing through Mercia. Her brain had been telling her all along she was to remain with Bayard, but now she understood why, and not for bold reverence to the Saxon king. Elune's mind then threw up another possibility, and she turned to look at Arthur now. "Do you think that the fire I was told of could have been somewhere else? Not my village?" "Do you know its name?" Elune looked into Arthur's face, and conceded. "Henford, sire. It is by the Haefron. I was told it had been destroyed by pirates from over the water from Irian, and—" She stopped when Arthur put a hand on her arm again. This time she did not wrestle it free. "I fought that battle. We were called too late." He paused, and sighed. "I'm sorry." Elune said nothing, but sagged a little, stepping back into the darkness. "I am sorry to confirm this, Aeled," Arthur reiterated. "The raid was swift. The Irish took no prisoners. No one will be suffering now. And to you, that makes it well?" Elune replied, harshly, that the villagers are dead. But she had known it, in her heart, ever since Elphice had spoke of it. Arthur said nothing for a time, and Elune began pacing once more. Arthur settled down in the straw and, at length, Elune heard the slow, rhythmical breathing of a person asleep. "It is because I was discovered there," she said after a time, to the darkness, as if continuing the conversation with the now asleep Prince Arthur. "I was a river foundling. Someone wanted me to live. Someone chose me. And so I lived, thanks to two of Henford's people." She inhaled, determined to scream her lungs out rather than give in to threatening tears. "And now, I can never, ever, thank them." 88,888,888. By the morning, everyone knew Bayard was free. He did not, however, take up the invitation to sit beside Arthur and declined the meal that was to be laid on before they departed. Bayard did, however, call together all of the Britons he had promised a free choice of staying or going in Arthur's throne room. Elune, now back in her kitchen servant's clothing, stood with the rest of the Britons as they made their choice. Most chose to return to Cymru, and were bid stand beside Arthur. A handful, including Elune herself, stayed where they were. "We're going today. The king is anxious to return to Mercia," Seren whispered to Elune. "We?" Elune repeated. "You are coming?" "Not staying?" "I had thought of it," Seren whispered back, and Elune was sure she had looked at one of the Saxon horsemen, who were standing guard beside Bayard. "I do not wish to leave the Lady Elaine." "And Eadwig?" Elune asked, pointedly. Seren blushed. "If my lady permits it, we will be wed," Seren told her. But, at that moment, a hand landed on her shoulder. Too late to fight it, Elune felt horror in her stomach as Prince Arthur held her by the collar of the servant's smock. "And you think you could get away with," began the snarl in Arthur's voice, and Elune remembered with sharp vividness the scene between her and Merfine, when she had insulted the prince. Behind him, Merfine grinned horribly. And the guard, whose bravery showed no wavering, King Bayard announced. Aeled, who wishes to remain in my service, that'll be me, Elund declared, fortune's wheel swinging back round in her favor. The bruise on her shoulder that she would discover later was well worth the wrench away from Arthur's grip to see the expression on his face. Bayard had a led stand in front of him, and rewarded her for her loyalty by giving her a position as mercenary guard, effectively immediately. For it is only in moments of great danger when one discovers the depths of one's bravery. But, Elund noticed, Bayard did not specify her actions. Too soon, she supposed. Clapping echoed around Arthur's throne room as Seren brought the blue cloak, the king putting a spear in her hand. Elund dared not look at Arthur directly, but guessed, correctly of course, that she had been the guard in the dungeons with whom he had spoken. Then, Arthur grinned, and joined in the clapping as she returned to her place in the returning Britons. "Well played," he whispered, as Bayard's servants filed out of the hall. "There is someone who wishes to thank you." Arthur stepped aside, and Merlin was in her eyeline. The young man stepped across to Elund and extended a hand, which she took. Gwen was beside him, and she smiled to Elund. 88,888,888. Before Elund left Camelot to be a guard, and to be safe, she asked Merlin to show her to the guardroom she was to take mail from. "From what I hear you know this well," he replied, taking Elund down to the courtyard. "Perhaps, Elund," pushing open the guardroom door. She looked around for the mail, which turned out to be in an alcove. Merlin strode over and began handing her pieces. "Gwen told me what you did," he told Elund. "Picked up a flower that Gwen would have picked up anyway." Elund scoffed, pulling on a sleeve gauntlet. "Still, thank you," Merlin replied, leaning over and passing her the matching gauntlet. "If we should ever meet again, then, I doubt it," Elund told him, pulling on the second. "I feel my duty is to my king." Merlin stopped in his hunt for the vest, and saw a broken bar. Elund need a broken bar for the first time. He blinked, and he was a lead hand out, waiting for their mail vest. "Even though you are a Briton, none of my family lives. My best friend is exiled, our druid was driven away. Everything I know, gone, because of Arthur. I do not seek revenge, but I cannot stay here." She pulled the metal mail cut over her leather jerkin. "But, there is one hope. I have a brother. Prince Arthur says it's impossible, but, did he come here to be a knight? You would know, being Arthur's servant." Elund pressed, shrugging her shoulders so the mail vest fitted properly. When Merlin did not answer, Elund looked at him and said, "Lancelot?" "No, sorry, no," Merlin told Elund, shaking his head. "I've never heard anyone of that name." Elund held the silence for a time, in memoriam, perhaps. Likely, but not certain, for Lancelot may have gone to offer his services to another British king. Of this, if Lancelot lived, Elund was sure he would choose to do this. "He must have perished when my village was attacked." "Then I am sorry," Merlin told her. "Should he come here, I will be sure to tell him you are serving King Bayard." "Please see broken bar, don't," Elund told him. "If he learns where I am, he will think I betrayed his family." Merlin nodded slowly, and was about to chain up the armor cupboard when, "I know," Elund told him, stepping close to Merlin. "At least, I think you do broken bar have magic." It wasn't a question. Merlin knew that Elund knew his secret. But how? He tensed, unsure how the conversation would now go. "It's illegal in Camelot," Merlin told her. Elund looked at his face, and then nodded. "My best friend was forced to leave." "Matthew, you have a secret too," Merlin blurted out. And, within a microsecond, Elund's spear point was at his chin. "And if you tell it, I will come back from America and kill you." "You won't," Merlin told her. "You're not say, you're a Briton." "Do I look like Ein?" she demanded to know. Merlin took in her golden hair, pale blue eyes, and shook his head. Elund relaxed a little. No, you don't, but that's not the secret." "I think I know yours." Elund pressed to Merlin. "You're an abandoned prince." Merlin deflected. Whatever Elund expected, it wasn't that. "You were abandoned, Prince Arthur told me." He held up a hand as Elund was about to protest. "But I know." Because Merlin had anticipated an argument. "Your father is a king." "You don't know it, but," a ripple of color passed over Merlin's hand. He closed it, quickly. And you have magic, Elund declared, softly. Merlin's face froze. My best friend, a broken bar. We were so close, we are practically one person, Elund confided, taking a step back, and looking over. Then one day, he had to leave. He has magic too, if he is still alive. I know, Merlin, Elund added, before Merlin could deny it. Please, broken bar, don't say anything, Merlin said, at last. As long as you don't tell my secret, if it really is one. Otherwise Bayard may think I am a prince bent on usurping his throne. Merlin smiled. They shook hands. Then he showed her to the courtyard. From Gaius's rooms, Merlin and Gwen watched the Saxons, Elund with them, set out to the east. And Elund thought she would never be back. Never is a long time. Elund, however, had made a mistake in returning east. For, no less than a week later, Lancelot would come to Camelot, and things would become a broken bar. A broken bar complicated a broken bar.